Here for Peter.
Great. It's new one. That's great. We're going to have the new ones. Good evening. Welcome to Poetry at the Dalí. I'm Hank Hine. I'm the museum director, and we are so honored to have this program curated by Helen Pruitt Wallace. And we're honored to have each of you here as well to hear these truly distinguished poets tonight. We are further honored to have in our audience one of our trustees, Catherine Swintek, and the Poet Laureate of Florida and his daughter, Peter Meinke. And the husband and inspiration to our program, Peter Wallace. And we're grateful to those organizations that support us, including the city of St. Petersburg, and very appreciative of our staff that is videotaping the evening, and we'll be passing a microphone around so that you can have a dialogue with our poets later. It has been our tradition to cajole, coax, insist, plea, beg from Helen each month a new poem, and we have so many writers in the audience. I know that productivity, has an interesting curve, an interesting graph, and sometimes we can write 3 or 4 poems in a week. We have a great period, and sometimes we have to take a long time at it. But we have this consistent pressure on Helen, which I really feel embarrassed about. So, but nonetheless, she's required to read a poem of her own each time, and then she will introduce our distinguished poets tonight. So welcome to Poetry at the Dalí. Helen.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. What a great turnout, and we're in for such a terrific program with these 2 poets, Peter Blakey and Donovan McAbee. So thank you both so much for being here, and all of you. And I will read one short poem, but how it is not new. Although I do have actually a lot of new poems, but it's a love poem, I figure, right? Because Valentine's Day. So it's just a short little love poem. And I think there's really not anything in it that you wouldn't understand, except maybe I think most of you would know about the butter cow that's at the Iowa State Fair. If you don't know about the butter cow, you want to check it out because it's pretty cool. It's solid butter and it's a piece of sculpture made out of butter. So there's a reference to that in here, but everything else I think is pretty self-explanatory. And of course, it's for Peter. It's called Conjuring Light. I was thinking about the Sistine Chapel, how Michelangelo's Adam, called up by the fingertip of God, reminds us we're nothing without touch. Unless you look again, a little closer. He's fully formed, all sinuous and buff, with light glancing off his languid flesh, despite the hint their fingers haven't met. the milky space left between their reach. I, a daughter of Eve, might argue we're made from what we make, which reminds me of the butter cow displayed at the Iowa State Fair. 600 pounds of lathed creamy flanks, belly, and hooves with swirls of light smeared across its haunches. A new age fatted calf prepared for our prodigal world. But then I think of us and how sometimes in the blue haze of morning, daubed by the resin of sleep, I'm not sure if the curve beneath the sheet is yours or mine, or what to call the force we conjure there that with one touch sends us hurling into dawn. So, thank you. Thank you. I want to do a shout out, first of all, to the city of St. Petersburg. Thank you for supporting our program, and to all the terrific people here at this museum. First and foremost, Dr. Hank Hine, who's been so supportive of what we do here in the program. As well as Samaya Ayad, who you'll see, she'll be walking around with the mic when we get to the Q&A. Please wait until she finds you, because that way the folks tuning in on our live stream will be able to hear the questions as well. And also Dr. Kim McQuarrie, who could not be with us tonight, but she's a terrific help to our program also. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think I saw Denzel Johnson Green come in the back. Denzel is our brand new city poet laureate. And I'm a real fan of this guy. I'm very happy to know that he's going to be representing St. Petersburg as the next poet laureate. He'll be terrific. Congratulations, Denzel. Okay, I'd like to first start by reading the bio for Donovan McAbee. Donovan, we're so happy to have you with us, and I think you guys are in for a treat when you hear him read his work and also talk about his work. Donovan's a poet, songwriter, and essayist. His work has appeared in the New York Times, Time Magazine, the Hudson Review, Sun Magazine, Garden and Gun, Poetry London, and a variety of other places. The poet Major Jackson says that his book is exquisitely funny and magically solemn, both at the same time, which is wonderful. Donovan grew up in a small town in South Carolina, in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. He holds a Master of Divinity degree from Princeton Theological Seminary and a PhD in creative writing and contemporary poetry from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. He lives in Nashville, Tennessee with his wife and their 2 children and works as professor of religion and the arts at Belmont University. His poetry collection, Holy the Body, which I'm sure all of you will want to buy out front with Tombolo Books. They'll be waiting for you after the program. Has just been released by Texas Review Press in just brand new, like just days before you came here. So congratulations on the brand new book. Please welcome Donovan McAbee.
Thank you so much, Helen. It's really wonderful to be in St. Petersburg. I live in Nashville now, as Helen was saying. And if you've heard the news lately, it was a rough few weeks there with the ice storm. And I was looking forward to being here for a number of reasons. But during the ice storm, as I sat shivering in my home without electricity, with a temperature of 5 degrees outside, huddled with my wife and our 2 small children, I thought, I'd really love to be in Florida right now. It's wonderful to be here. I want to thank Dr. Hine, the Dalí Museum, Samaya Ayad, who made so many arrangements for this visit, and Helen Wallace. A number of years ago, I had a friend of mine, Fiona Benson, who's a really remarkable English poet, come to Nashville, and she said she would read for me under one condition, and that's that I read with her. And she's an old friend. I said, of course. And it came the night of, and I'm sitting here looking at my friend who has 3 books out, has won all kind of prizes, and gets flown places and paid money to read poetry. And I thought to myself, me opening for her feels like Billy Ray Cyrus opening for Yo-Yo Ma. And as I stand here tonight and think about Peter Balakian reading after me, I'm filled with a similar emotion. So it's a real honor for me to be here. I'm excited. I would have just come to hear Peter read, but I'm glad that that I get to share my poems with you first as well. I grew up again in a small town in the foothills of the mountains a member of a tribe of people called the Southern Baptists. Maybe you've heard of us. My tribe is not always in the news for good reasons these days. It's not the place I find a spiritual home anymore, but those are my roots. And we often had these characters come through town called evangelists. And this next poet is about one of those who used to come through town, and he came up from Florida. I will not give away his name, but it's another Florida connection in my collection of poetry. This one, almost said song. This one's called Crusade Against Rock. The traveling evangelist with the permed mullet played Another One Bites the Dust, slowed down in reverse for our congregation. If we listened closely, he insisted we could hear Freddie Mercury, who sounded now like Darth Vader, testifying to us all, "It's fun to smoke marijuana. It's fun to smoke marijuana." We heard it nearly plain as day. The Lord isn't the only one who works in mysterious ways. The remedy must outdo the poison, the evangelist told us. The next night, I gathered up my own little stack of songs, said goodbye to F you, don't take it personal. Adios, easy does it. So long, straight out of Compton. The liner notes turned black beneath the melting plastic. The fumes of our youth group's burnt offering drifted on the wind. Maybe this was what God wanted. But even now, my heart aches to think about that moment. The flames took hold of Bob Marley's legend. His head cocked, his eyes knowing, and all those dreads suddenly on fire. Thank you. So this is, as Helen mentioned, my first full collection of poetry. And as you can tell, I'm rather long in the tooth as debut authors go. But my writing life, much like the genesis of this book, began just before I turned 22 years old, when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. It's a time when I was moving from an undergraduate life into a seminary. And I had been one of those, I was a real nerdy student. I don't know if you can tell that about me. Most professors probably were, But when my mom was diagnosed with cancer and several other things happened, this was, the fall of 2011, and my mom was working in New York City, saw the second plane hit the Twin Towers. I mean, this was a tumultuous moment in our personal life and a tumultuous moment in our private life as well. And I found myself in a lot of turmoil. And even though the academic part of my brain had usually served me well, it felt like it was gone. But what I found is, though I couldn't engage with academics like I had before with philosophy and theology quite so clearly, I could engage in stories, I could engage in poetry. And that's when I started writing poetry seriously for the first time. I had written a little bit before then, but poetry became a sanctuary for me in many ways. And the first part of this book really does deal a lot with the grief I experienced as a younger man with my mother's diagnosis of cancer and her death. And that's sort of the setting of this poem many years later. It's called Sightings. Shortly after her death, Mother Teresa appeared in a cinnamon bun in Nashville, Tennessee. She looked serious, perturbed even, as though this epiphany were an inconvenience. Once, in the 90s, when statues of the Virgin were crying all over Ireland, one in Donegal did not get the memo. A sign hung around its neck announcing this Holy Mother out of order. I found myself 2 years after Mom died, in the second pew from the front in a dark, empty chapel. I looked up at the 6-foot-tall wooden Jesus, votive candles at his feet, and I could see a tear falling over and over down his right cheek, a trick of light and shadow, but somehow I knew in that moment they were, for me, those tears. Thank you. I have a fragile ego, but you don't have to do that every time. My wife, I think my wife and children might be on the YouTube. Hello. I hope you're being good to your mother, Aiden and Marin. But she can attest to my fragile ego and to all the ways it makes life difficult. This next poem, though, was a very difficult one to write, and it's a difficult one maybe to read as well, so I want to be sensitive to that. This next poem will take about 6 minutes to read, and it makes mention, I will just sort of by way of warning offer that it makes mention of sexual assault kind of in the first third of it, so if anyone needs to sort of check out momentarily, I want to just sort of put that out there for you. It's called Mama's Body, and it's divided into 9 sections, each of which is typically a year or a time demarcation. Mama's Body, 2004. The nurses remove the IV. Take the tube from your nose. Move the bed to the center of the room so we can circle and pray. Your spirit, because I believe on this day in such a thing, has abandoned its husk, lifted from the room, or walked out the door. The marriage of body and breath broken. Mama, not mama. Mama, my first home. 1960. You woke to the sound of a vase toppling off an end table, ran down the hallway to the door of the living room where your mama lay on the floor, your daddy standing above her, calling her names you were told not to repeat. You ran to your room like you always did. Years later, you tell me you'd cover your body in the sheets, pull the blanket over your head, close your eyes, and pray to disappear, that the mattress might swallow you like the ocean. 1966. Some things better left unsaid, so you thought, for 2.5 decades, while those secrets nursed dreams that crawled through your nights. How after supper, your friend's dad would play strip poker with you and her at the dining room table when you were 11. How he'd take you later from the bed where you slept, your friend's mom always in the kitchen washing up. 1977. You at 22 sit on the couch, rubbing your belly. You hold the little yellow dress with white frills that Grandma gave you. 20 weeks along, the ultrasound's silent scan. Daddy takes you to the hospital where the doctor delivers the stillborn, carries it away. 2 years later, you put the yellow dress on me so you could imagine how beautiful your little girl might have been. 1985. I nuzzle into you on the couch, rest in the crook your legs make as you lie on your side. You stroke my curly hair and I go to sleep while you and Daddy watch TV. You carry me then down the hallway to my bedroom, sing an ocean lullaby, rock me snug as a bug for the night. 1993. You reach out for me while we drive down 26. Put your hand on my knee like you've always done. I draw back, refuse touch. You reach out with your words to ask about my week, to find out if there's some girl who's caught my eye. You make this 350-mile round trip twice every other weekend, more often when I ask you to, just to see me. After the divorce, I fortify myself. Won't let you touch me. Won't let Dad touch me. Don't want to let anyone touch me ever again. 2001. Your arm bandaged to keep edema from settling in. You retch into the plastic pail the nurse gave you, a reaction to the anesthesia. You apologize again for the inconvenience this has caused me. As I look at the wound under your arm where the surgeon removed the lymph nodes, I take you next morning back to the house to wait for pathology to give us the verdict. Not breast cancer, as everyone had told us, but melanoma. That word, melanoma, we hear. Melanoma spread through. Melanoma, every word. Melanoma, we speak. Melanoma, those three. Melanoma, last. Melanoma, years. Years later, a need is never sufficient for its own fulfillment, or perhaps therein resides a miracle worth pondering. An unloved woman learned to love. You made water from thirst, bread from hunger. The last section, date uncertain. There must have been moments when it felt like yours, when it didn't belong to fear or pain, or to a man or a child. Times when your long, dark hair brushed your shoulders on a windy day, when the sun warmed your skin and you felt the glory of this other belonging. Thank you. Thank you. So some poems are very long, and some are about the length of a breath. And this one is called After the Fact. I know you by the space you leave empty. I draw lines in the air where the roof used to be. I wait for you, Lord, like a mailbox for a letter. The grass still wonders how the ground got there. So by trade, I'm a religion professor, religion and the arts. Don't hold that against me. We all have to make a living, no matter how nefariously the money comes in. And growing up very religious and still being a very religious person, you hear a lot about arguments for the existence of God, arguments against the existence of God. I don't usually go in for that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? But these two poems are my attempts to at least enter the fray a bit, So this first poem is a twin poem. This one's called Anecdotal Evidence for the Existence of God. Orgasms, cotton candy, chocolate-covered almonds, coffee, river stones. That time after praying when I would have doubted my own existence before I would have doubted God's. Tortoises, ice cream, the ocean. And then because I'm a fair-minded person, if nothing else, we do need to give the other side its own, airing. And so that's my attempt here. It's called Anecdotal Evidence Against the Existence of God. The poor design and frequent malfunctioning of the prostate gland. Licorice. World War II, dysentery, The Godfather, Part 3, all those times after praying when I went away empty. Mosquitoes, standardized tests, every square inch of Orlando, Florida. I'm sorry. I really was not sure how that one would play here. Sorry. Thank you. If I was a little worried about that one, but if it will make up for it, I'm actually friends with the person who named the Orlando Magic. So if you want that story, it will cost you a gin and tonic later. Okay, I'll be glad to tell it. About 10 years ago, my dad visited my wife and I in Nashville. We had just found out we were pregnant. We were pregnant. I hate when people say we were pregnant. It gives every woman who's ever been pregnant the right to strike the man who just says it. I remember when my wife was pregnant, when we were expecting a child, we just found out, and my father was visiting from South Carolina, and we sat down for lunch at our table, and we're going to say the blessing. And I reached my hand out for my dad, and reached my hand across for my wife, and I looked over, and my dad was slumped over the table, and his eyes were staring out into nothing. And my dad was disabled for my entire life. He was struck with a terrible form of rheumatoid arthritis about the time I was born. But I look at him, I tell he can't breathe. He's not breathing, and I shake him. I take him to the floor and do CPR on him. And it's a crazy story that he lived, and he passed away 3.5 years ago. But those last 6 years felt like an absolute gift because we were that close to him not meeting our first child. And instead, he got to know that little boy and my daughter. But this poem grows out of that experience, and obviously it's dedicated to my father. It's called Breath. All of a sudden, you slumped out of life, those bluest of eyes staring out to where form collapses, unaware in your awareness of the sudden blows back against the floor, the cracking of sternum beneath my hands, attempting to call you back from wherever it was you were wandering off to, forcing air into your lungs, the hum, high-pitch squeal, the call to clear, electricity lifting you for a moment near resurrection. I hold your hand in the ER as you die again and again and again and again. Epinephrine, norepinephrine, vasopressin, amiodarone, propofol, fentanyl, a dozen more dripping, portacath in your neck, femoral line, IVs snaked into both your arms, swan gans, fish hooked through the heart's chambers, the plastic tube in your lungs jitters each breath. I sit beside your bed, hoping God might be bothered enough this time to answer a prayer. It was a harrowing time. He coded 5 times, and if you code 5 times, you don't usually come back. And if you do, you're not cognitively intact. And the fact that he was, as a religious family, we use words like miracle. My agnostic father-in-law, who was a ER physician, he said there's not really a statistic for what happened. It was so off the charts, given everything. So we were grateful for that time. I've got 2 poems, 2 more, before we get to hear Peter read. This one's the title poem from the collection. I meant to look this up beforehand, but I've always heard that St. Francis of Assisi refers to the body as brother ass, and that's certainly a fine metaphor, if there ever was one, for our relationships with our bodies, or at least some of us. I will say that metaphor works for me. This is the title poem of the collection, Holy the Body. I've thought so little of you, that now you seek your revenge in the grinding of kneecaps, the tightening of hamstrings, loss of elasticity, the skin, so long neglected you weren't even an afterthought. I apologize each morning with a handful of pills. Oh, scarred flesh of me in the mirror as I turn the page on another decade. I bless the stretch marks on my stomach, evidence of those dead years when food was my one friend. I bless the crow's feet at the corners of my eyes, proof of days spent under the sun. I bless the gray in my beard, reminder that sometimes, despite ourselves, wisdom appears. I bless our breaking down, dear body. Pray the process is slow, that when time confronts us with its choices, you'll show me when to hold on, when to let go. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. So this is the last poem I want to read for you tonight. One thing that poets do, for those of you that aren't poets in the audience, is our pretensions grow out of our insecurities. I just want to put that out there. And one thing that we do to buttress our pretensions is that we use dead languages, words from dead languages in our poems. And so this poem, I did that smooth move. I could have called it body, but no, I called it corpus. 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 This will be the last poem. Thank you so much. Corpus. When God is silent late at night, and I'm watching the shadows the moon makes against the wall, I wish sometimes for certainty to know God like the fetal pig I dissected in high school, its legs tied back with twine on an aluminum tray, flesh obedient to the scalpel as I separated skin from meat, meat from bone, living silence from the silence of death. But I lie awake and listen instead to the wind-rustled leaves of the poplar, to the quiet breaths my wife makes as she lies here sleeping. And I pray or think to myself, which in these moments feels like prayer, oh, this is enough. This is more than enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Donovan. That was wonderful. Thank you. And we'll look forward to hearing more about your process and about some of the specific poems in our Q&A. But couldn't you listen to that voice just all night? If a couple people came in, I want to make sure that there are seats in the front. If anybody, it looks like maybe you found something in the back. But yeah. And so, Holy the Body, please look for this after the program with Tumblo Books. And I should do a shout out for Tumblo. They are our wonderful indie bookstore, and we now have many in St. Pete. But Tumblo has been with us since the very beginning, and they're terrific, and we so appreciate what they do for our community at the bookstore. So yeah, you'll want to buy some of these good books. And next, what a treat to have Peter Balakian with us. And I should start by saying that I see Ajibola in the audience. He's right here. Ajibola, you read for us maybe a few months ago, I think, a couple months ago. And Ajibola had the good fortune of being Peter's student. And so, and first told me about Peter being in the area and about the possibility of our getting him here. So thank you for that, Ajibola. Yeah, it is such a pleasure to have Peter Balakian with us. And I'm just going to read from the shorter biography that he sent to me. He is the author of 9 books of poems, wow, and 4 books of prose and 3 collaborative translations and several edited books. The Ozone Journal won the 2016 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry, and his new book of poems is New York Trilogy, also out front with Tumblo Books. His prose books include Vice and Shadow, Essays of the Lyric Imagination, Poetry, Art, and Culture, Black Dog of Fate, which is a memoir, and winner of the 1998 Penn Martha Albrand Prize for the Art of Memoir. which was a best book of the year for the New York Times, the LA Times, and Publishers Weekly. That's amazing. And also, let's see. Wow, and yeah, the Burning Tigris, the Armenian Genocide and America's Response, which was the winner of the 2005 Raphael Lemkin Prize, and a New York Times notable book and New York Times bestseller. He's the recipient of many awards, including the Pulitzer Prize, the Presidential Medal for the Republic of Armenia, a Guggenheim Fellowship, a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, a Spenlove Prize for Social Justice, Tolerance and Diplomacy. He's appeared widely on television, on national television and radio, and his work has been translated into many languages. He's a Donald M. and Constance R. Rebar Professor of Humanities and Professor of English at Colgate University. So I want to also say that when I was asking Ajibola about Peter Balakian and kind of any tips from him about his teaching, he said that Peter felt strongly that every poem had to have a real oomph moment in it, but he never quite described exactly what that oomph moment should be, which is typical, right, of a brilliant professor. They want you to figure that out on your own. But I love that. But what Ajibola said is it was very clear that there is an expectation to work out all the hard stuff right on the page. And I think you'll see that and hear that in Peter Balakian's work. Please give a warm welcome to Peter Balakian.
Thanks so much, Helen. Look, it's great to be with fellow poets. Donovan, Helen, thank you and your leadership for this series. Ajibola, who's in the audience, and Helen has mentioned, thank you, marvelous poet, for connecting me to the marvelous poets in St. Pete. Peter Monkey, it's great to be here with you. You're a legend, and I'm really happy to see you in the audience and look forward to talking with you. And Tombola Bookstore, God bless you. Independent bookstores matter more than ever. I have to say, it's just a joy to be in this museum. It is just so beautiful and exciting. And I also want to note that I'm not the first member of my family to speak here. So my Aunt Anna, who was a distinguished scholar of surrealism, wrote a well-known biography of Breton, knew Dalí, knew Breton. She was kind of John the Baptist for the surrealist movement, really. Auntie Anna spoke here, I don't know exactly when. I've got to find out the exact date, but it was exciting to learn that. And so anyway, I'm just following in her footsteps. Listen, I want to also say that I read these days everywhere I go, every public event I'm at, I read a short political statement, and I will do that here tonight. As an American writer and university professor of 46 years, I feel it's my obligation to witness what's happening to our democracy. I believe this is well beyond party identities and party politics. Donald Trump's assaults on universities, higher education, on secondary education and civic culture, including museums, through coercion and tactics that resemble extortion, are often anti-democratic and violations of the First Amendment. To falsify history, as this administration is doing, is to undermine the foundations of fact, knowledge, and moral understanding. I don't believe any of this will ultimately work. Critical thinking and knowledge production in our democratic educational structures comprise a sedimentary rock with layers embedded in several hundred years of culture and intellectual life. Without that culture and our open, pluralistic systems of learning, we wouldn't have a democracy. I'm reminded that Nazism, although violently destructive, wasn't able to destroy the Enlightenment tradition in Germany, as you can see from viewing contemporary Germany. It's hard for me as a writer to separate the political world from my art. I have been a poet for decades who've been engaged in history, and often traumatic histories and collective memories of trauma. And I'll say something about the Armenian genocide past tonight that does trickle into various poems of mine. I do want to open tonight by introducing this book, New York Trilogy, which is my new book. It's a long poem, and long poems may be unfamiliar to some of you. So I want to say a little bit about the long poem. This long poem is made up of 3 long poems from my last 3 books. So in New York Trilogy, these 3 long poems have come together. Book 1, A Train Cigarette Elegy. Book 2, Ozone Journal. And Book 3, No Sign. In the course of these 143 sections, I don't want this to deter anybody from buying the book, because this is a fun way of telling a story. And the American long poem in the Whitman tradition, which is the tradition of the long poem that is lyrically sequential rather than narratively continuous, I think is a great American invention. As American as the cheeseburger, the superhighway, the skyscraper, baseball, and jazz. I have a great passion for the long poem, and so at this point in my life, I've been able to pursue my love of that form. So in this poem, you'll follow one man's journey, some of it, much based on my experience, and some of it, of course, imagined. One man's journey from the late 1960s into the early 21st century that is set in Manhattan and the on-looking New Jersey cliffs called the Palisades, and intimate experience, love, loss, divorce, parenting, art, music, etc., intersect with traumatic historical explosions, Armenian genocide, Hiroshima, 9/11, the Iraq War of the early 21st century, the geoclimate crisis, and so on. So these things are moving back and forth. And again, I want this to be fun. I don't want this to seem intimidating. Knowledge is fun. Poems are about language. So I thought I would start tonight, in the time we have, reading the first 6 sections from Book 2, Ozone Journal. In this book, there are 4 narrative threads in each book. In this book, this is fact of my life, I went with 60 Minutes, the great, investigative news show, to the Syrian desert in 2009 on a forensic mission to excavate the remains of Armenians killed in the Armenian genocide by the Ottoman Turkish government in 1915, because in eastern Syria became the Auschwitz, so to speak, of the Armenian genocide. We can talk more about that history later if you want. My grandparents' generations are survivors of that explosion. There is also a thread of a cousin of mine who is dying of AIDS. There is a thread of a relationship that has broken up. And there is a thread of my interviews with the great jazz producer of the mid-century, the great George Avakian at Columbia Records, who is a dear friend of mine. And he's fictionalized as Jerry in this poem. So I'm going to read you the first 6 sections. 1. I woke to CFCs humming out of coils. I woke to a compression in my head and the compressor in the wall that made cool air come out of the vents. Couldn't sleep. Downloaded photos of the day to stare at them as if the sky were something I could breathe in. Not good times by the sea, but desert blue and cracked ground, some tumbleweed blowing into my jeans. Green signs of Arabic letters looked like beautiful tributaries as they faded out along a road going to the Iraqi border, where oil refineries were firing on the horizon, where a border is a road ending and beginning. 2. All day I was digging Armenian bones out of the Syrian desert, with a TV crew that kept ducking the Mukhabarat. Excuse me. With a TV crew that kept ducking the Mukhabarat, who trailed us in jeeps and at night joined us for arak and grilled goat under colored pennants and cracked lights in cafes where piles of herbs glistened back at me. I passed out from sun and arak and camel jokes in a massive hotel, my room open to the Euphrates that was churning in the moonlight. 3. When I woke, I was dreaming back to the 80s on Riverside Drive, where Ani was born on a bright spring day, in a decade of money and velvet, when the plastic voice of Sinatra floated through the fern bars where we lounged with wine spritzers and lemon drop martinis. It was silver palette and more than cuisine, with its encoded sense of ending, and the smoked sable at Barney Greengrass, where we took Ani for lunch on Sunday when the morning was lit up and open. 4. Dreaming back to days. Why here on the Black Euphrates at 4 a.m.? After our life went up in blue flame as the gas jet died and we were gone to each other. The walls silent and the floorboards echoed. The U-Haul came and my books got rained on, and the flags were rippling for St. Gennaro. Thisbe and Pyramus disappeared as myth and symbol, and that summed it up. 5. Those days, no dream. The squeaky cassette going on Jerry in Riverdale. When I arrived, the sky was graphed through phone wires and Amtrak cables. I was sitting beneath shelves of uncut masters, the 78s of 1940, when Jerry cut the modern LP and found the lost hot jazz of the 20s. I was staring at hanging Armenian rugs and the river glare on a photo of Miles Davis, almost liquid in the sepia emulsion of 1947, when the smoke spiraled into 3 deuces on 52nd at a table with Sterling Brown and Gillespie and Jerry. And he put it in his hammered speech, quote, John Hammond was so hated by the musicians. Miles cut him out of the photo and pasted Dizzy in. But that was before I got Miles interested in John Cage. 6. By noon, I was leaning on the cotton white hospital wall, gazing at the islands of purple lesions on David's slightly swollen leg, the edema rising in his groin, the sheets strewn, and the IV dripping blue down the snaking plastic tube. My year of magical thinking looped down the drain of my brain. Take care, cousin. I blew him a kiss. Oh, I'm good, thank you. Well, that's a little just snippet of how the sections move back and forth and shuttle. I just thought in the time I have left, I'd like to offer a few poems from different books to give you snippets of some things I do. This poem is called Reading Dickinson, meaning Emily Dickinson, 1968. I was a really serious high school football player. I was a running back. I was a recruited player, went off to college to play. I played only a year. Things got in the way. Injuries happened. That's a longer story. But I loved that game, played it hard. And at the same time, in my last years of high school, I began a secret life of falling in love with poetry. And so I was reading intensely while I was, kind of doing my life as a running back. And we had a great season my senior year. It was a lot of fun. As long ago as that stuff is, still stays close in your skin. Great time. But I was reading Emily Dickinson, Whitman, Eliot, Hart Crane, etc. So this poem tries to capture the duality of those two selves. And I'll also mention that my summer job was as a mail runner and a stock boy for a steamship company on Lower Manhattan. So that gets into this poem too. Reading Dickinson, summer 68. In the hermetic, almost dark, under the fluorescent diz, I found her broken nerves, smoke coming off the dashes, the caps like jolts to the neck, the pried open spaces between vowels where the teeth bit off twine and the tongue was raw, then cool with ice. The air of the stockroom after lunch was the marbleized silence of those small blank pages she stitched into privacy. Air of paper and faint glue, bond, carbon, graph, yellow pads. In the stockroom, I could read alone, and the confetti of money dissolved on the blank wall. After work, I slid the numbered poems on blue Mimeo into my playbook and felt the open field, the zigzagging past cornerbacks, the white lines skewed to heaven. Excuse my mood, unbridled, chemical. Her scrawled messages were smooth to the mind. Excuse my absence again, and yes, then too. The cold stone of the Palisades was there after we split, alone, naked in the Hudson, the water greasing me in the tepid chemical mix, before I returned to the cement of Route 9W in my father's Skylark, the night black and soundless within. That's from a book called Ziggurat, 2010 book called Ziggurat. I want to, we could do a whole great symposium, and you may have done it, on the unconscious in the Dalí Museum, which is a kind of a tribute to the unconscious and Dalí's extraordinary sense of the dream life. And I was struck reading, the wall text about Dalí's conversion, which I had thought was Breton, but it was really first reading Freud's interpretation of dreams. Excuse me. So I want to read this poem that dips a little bit into dream life and the unconscious as I, dip into it in my imagination and life, set in my backyard in central New York, upstate New York. Colgate University is set in a gorgeous part of New York State. And here, a summer night, drifting off, yellow lilies. Looking up, a galaxy is any star skidding into black. A black hole is my love. Who knows what's in the next cushion of air? What if a hole is just a Greek urn or Sarah's paint stick spiral? It's past midsummer and specks of light or wings of giant birds. I'll hang my torn soul on that. Take the flash of a star, the white line of a plane. Hear the ocean sound of words, hum blare horn of wind. When I wake in gray light, black rocks, cardinals, yellow lilies, cumulonimbus, the grass is drying on me. A deer's eyes burn through the pines. And that's from a book called No Sign. My grandmother's been an enormous influence on my life. All these years later, she still informs me all the time. She died when I was 13, and we were very close. I write about her in my story, my family story, memoir, Black Dog of Fate. She survived the Armenian genocide, a brutal deportation in August of 1915. Everyone in her family was killed. She witnessed maybe all of it. I don't know. Everyone was killed. Even her first husband died on the march. This was the extermination of the largest Christian minority population of the Ottoman Empire behind the screen of World War I. And my grandmother survived this death march through the Syrian desert with her one infant and one toddler daughter. And so her coming to America via Ellis Island is an extraordinary moment. She made it after 5 years of working and hiding out in Aleppo. She made it to Ellis Island in the spring of 1920. And I think, too, these days, as we're witnessing horrific things happening to refugees and immigrants in our country, unlawfully often, the violence is horrible to watch and horrible to believe. But I think it is always necessary to celebrate that we are, except for Native Americans, we are a nation of immigrants. And that is so much of our strength in this great pluralistic society of ours. So Ellis Island, it is a tribute to my grandmother, but also to all those who've made it to these shores under duress. Ellis Island. The tide is a Bach cantata. The beach is the swollen neck of Isaac. The tide's a lamentation of white opals. The beach is free. The Coke machine rusted out. Here's everything you'll never need. Hemp cords, curry combs, jade and musk, stockings that walked to Syria in 1915. On the rocks, some ewes and rams graze in the outer dark. The manes of the shoreline undo your hair. A sapphire ring is fingerless. The weed and algae are floating like a bed, and the bloodless gulls whose breaths would stink of all of us if we could kiss them on the beaks, are gnawing on the dead. I've written I've kind of gotten obsessed with this because there's a section in my book, No Sign, that are meditations on fruits and vegetables. They just become absolute, and I love to cook. I come from a family of, my mother's a terrific chef, still alive in her very late 90s. Love to cook. A lot of my family loves to cook. We're foodies, as they say. And I think these poems come out of that passion for the beauty of the ingredients, the organicism of the fruits and vegetables that go into things we make. I want to read a couple of them. In some ways, they are also tributes to my mother. My mother is pushing 99 and really barely alive. If some of you have been through this experience, this outliving yourself is a really complex thing. I can't really express it, but maybe you understand the complexity of that. But my mother's was a powerful force of energy, the youngest daughter of my grandmother, the Death March survivor, and a great chef, as I mentioned, and a great eye for beauty, and raised us with a great reverence for beauty and a house full of beautiful things and great cuisine. This is called Eggplant, and you may get the evocations of the historical vibe in this poem that's going to take you back in time. Not all these poems do that, but some of them do. Eggplant. I love the white moon circles and the purple halos on a plate as the salt sweat them. The oil in the pan smoked like bad days in the Syrian desert, when a moon stayed all day, when morning was a purple elegy for the last friend seen, when the fog of the riverbank rose like a holy ghost. My mother made those white moons sizzle in some egg wash and salt. Some parsley appeared from the garden, and summer evenings came with no memory, but the table with white dishes, shining aubergine, black-skinned beauty, bitter apple. We used our hands. Well, honestly, I don't think my mother and father used their hands, but I did. So I want to exonerate them. And I want to close with a poem again, thinking of my mother at the very end and the beauty she raised us with. That sometimes, everyone's home, I think it's true, everyone's home is a text. And when we're kids, we're absorbing the text, the objects, the images, the sense, the smells, all the things going on in the home. And as we get older, we begin to read that text. At least that's been true for me as a writer. This is called My Mother's Sink. My mother hated the sink that came with our new colonial house, had it ripped out, then found in an art shop a 4-foot slab of Italian marble with a bowl of bronze fish swirling the white porcelain. Handles and spout, high legs, all bronze. A bathroom sink just for the kids, she said. Washing up each day, I stared through shaving cream and spit at the bronze fish under toothpaste, suds, and cream. Years later, it hit me every time I returned as I spit and shaved. The fish of Paul Klee, Matisse, Jan Bruegel, slithering tales of Tintoretto, all seeped in me, the way that time patinas your skin. Even now, my brain sinks into the tepid water of that basin. The bronze fish swimming around the black hole of the drain, where my mother too has gone, though indelible in the grainy waves of that marble. Thank you.
Wow, what a terrific reading. Thank you so much, Peter. Let's give both of these poets another round of applause, please. So many terrific poems. We will segue into our Q&A. And if you don't mind, if you'll raise your hand if you have a question, and so that Samaya can find you, and then people at home will be able to hear it as well. And let's start with a question by Dr. Hine.
Thank you, gentlemen. It was a real pleasure to hear each of you. I wanted to ask a question about the relation of prayer to poetry. Each of your poems seem to be approach poetry as a form of a kind of litany of sufferings that will appeal to, just to start the conversation, to appeal to some higher power for grace. And I just want to ask you about that relationship on any level, from formal to aspirational, between poetry and prayer.
Great question. Yeah.
Thank you. It's an important question. Is this on?
No, it's not.
No. Do I need it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Only for the live stream.
Okay, sure. Yeah, really important question. I always open a semester telling my students that poetry is the most ancient form of literary art, that it is inseparable from prayer, chant, song, and dithram. It is inseparable from the language of the sacred. And prayer and chant and song all tied together as rhythmic speech. The cadences and the compression, the focus, the meditative focus that is part of prayer is in the very foundation of poetry. So that's my one response in the more of a historical, conceptual sense. Donovan, I give that to you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I think for me, sometimes poetry has offered me the opportunity and the space to pray my truest prayers. You know, I grew up in a form of Christianity that I didn't feel welcome asking some questions out loud. It didn't feel always safe to do that. And I think those of us raised in sort of particularly conservative religious traditions, sometimes questions are threatening. So I think I could find sometimes me stifling myself, you know. But when it came to poems, I found I could say things in that space that I couldn't in other places. So I remember writing that poem, even though it's in my 30s, or maybe 30-something, 40, when I wrote that poem, Breath. When I came to those last lines, it's also a place where I can articulate what I didn't realize I needed to articulate. But when I landed on those two last lines, hoping maybe God would be bothered enough this time to answer a prayer. Mm. You know, when we talk about God, if you're religious, sometimes you're afraid to challenge God, even though that's a deep part of the Jewish and the Christian traditions, you know, questioning God, being angry with God. But poetry offers me a space to say what otherwise might feel unsayable. And that is interesting when you think about the rhythm and the way you can feel when you're listening to a poet or even reading your own stuff, your body kind of starts to move into it a little bit. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that which connects us most deeply with our bodies is also that which, if we're religious, makes us feel connected to that which is transcendent, So bringing those two things together is kind of magical, spiritual, religious, mystical, yeah. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. Actually, I think I'll ask one now because it's sort of tied somewhat to your question, Hank. You both write a lot about place in very different ways. But if you could talk a little bit about the importance of place in your work, Peter, the way you move back and forth in time and place and weave it in, the fragments and the sort of the nonlinear, just trusting that your readers will follow you and move through time with you and move through place with you is so interesting to me. If you could talk about that, but then also, Donovan, your use of place, it feels very integral to the types of things you write about, and your way of writing, the deep Southern culture and being part of the South. Would you mind both?
Donovan, you go first.
And prayer may be connected.
Oh, all right. Trying to out-polite one another. No, you. I think so much of this book is rooted in family and in place. And I think there's something about just the way I talk that comes through in the words, so that it does feel hopefully not drenched in place in a way that's off-putting, but rather that recreates the space so people enter that world, I think. I'm blathering a bit, but one of the things that I find remarkable about Peter's work and about poets to me who bring a deep, long sense of history into their work is that they can help us see those layers. And I think that this book in particular is so rooted in the private domestic life. I don't know that I always do a good job of showing the longer history. Some of these poems do deal with sacred history within them. But I admire writers, and you think about American writers like Natasha Trethewey, who show you the moment and then show you the moments behind it that bring you to that moment. I don't totally think I do that here. I don't think that's where this book resides, but I appreciate that about Peter's work, the long history that you sense and you feel. The narrator's walking around New York City, but you feel the Ellis Island and how we got there and all of that history. So mine, I feel like, is rooted in place in a different way, in verbiage and religious culture, and maybe the religious story. But
Right, yeah.
Thank you. Well, yeah, Helen, that's, again, a 2-day symposium here on this subject. First I'm just reminded of the impact of place on American literature. Think of just some great figures, Hawthorne, Edith Wharton, Willa Cather, Faulkner, just throw out 4 titanic writers and think about their immersion in place. And, I think writers probably will agree that place is attractive. Place pulls a writer because it so energizes the imagination that as writers, you're trawling for the stuff that excites you and that you have an intimate relationship, some sort of intimate relationship with. And the phenomena, the data, the resources and materiality of place, and as Donovan's noting, language is a big part of that, because every place has its different nuance of language. It's so, from a hungry writer's point of view, these are gold mines not to miss. So all of you who are writers out there, you know that anyway, and some of you are on your way to being writers, that's a place to gravitate. For me, having grown up 8 miles from Midtown Manhattan in green suburban northern New Jersey, however, still the Big Apple and the northern Jersey cliffs were, where my head and experience marinated for so long. at a certain point in life, this is the stuff that starts churning up in your conscious mind. And, to play on our theme in the Museum of the Unconscious, the stuff's definitely down there.
Yep.
And you're unpacking it. And again, come back to Donovan's point, it's yielding speech patterns and language.
Yes.
It's yielding syntax and diction and images. And that's where we poets live.
Yeah. Thank you.
Much more to say, but a little opening.
Thank you, and I think Donovan, I think you were absolutely right. I like how you said that Peter's using that with the layers and the movement. You were exactly right about that. And what strikes me, though, Peter, with your poems is how quickly you can move through time and place with just the smallest fragment. Just relying on the image to take us there, and we trust it, and we're going to trust it, and then you. That's such an art. That's such a skill to be able to do that movement in time and place, using fragmentation and sort of quick snippets. Is hard to pull off. So yeah, it's wonderful. Questions from you all? Anyone in the back? Somebody up front here.
Thank you. So you both have very similar voices, and they're beautiful. But you're both also professors and academics, right? And my question has to do with how often in your poetry are you talking to the literary antecedents, the classics, and I include the Bible in that, obviously, and the epic, because I think, Peter, you mentioned that your work, the first poems that you read were kind of steeped in this epic tradition. So how often are you talking to those guys or those women as well, of which there were a few?
Okay, it's my turn to go first. Okay. Yeah, I mean, a wonderful big question. Again, it's a couple-day symposium to answer it. In a way, one way to perhaps think about your important big question is just to recall T.S. Eliot's famous essay, Tradition and the Individual Talent. And Eliot, writing this essay in the 1920s, is making a passionate case for the fact that writers and poets, if you want to make this art, you have to absorb what's come before you, or you have to be aware of it, absorb what you think is right for you, and you have to figure out how to do that without imitating. That becomes the big challenge for any writer at a certain point. We spend some time imitating the writers we love, and then we have to endure the inoculation. We can't die from the inoculation. We've got to endure it and start absorbing those lessons from the great texts and the unknown texts, whatever our magic brew of intertextuality is. So yeah, it's part of how you make the arts. Clearly, is how each writer absorbs their own strange and idiosyncratic roadmap of the great past, and that past can be very different. Clearly, the Hebrew Bible and the Scriptures are key, and the Greek epic poems are key. They're kind of the foundations in the Western tradition. They have been for me. So, yeah, it's a challenge, but it is part of the process of making art, is being part of that caravan and knowing how it is for you.
I love that. For me, growing up in a conservative evangelical place, like the Bible was the book, And when I was baptized the first time, we can go into that story more, at 5, for some reason at Rock Hill Baptist Church in Inman, South Carolina in 1984 or 1985, you were given a King James version of the Bible. And it wasn't a King James only church. There are those in the evangelical or the fundamentalist tradition, really. But I remember reading it as a 5-year-old, reading the King James Bible. And I had a penchant for memorizing scripture because you could quote Bible verses from the stage on Sunday nights at my church. So I had a penchant for memorizing and for performance. And so I memorized from a young age reams of, I would rattle off, a chapter, 15, 16 verses. And I remember reading it and thinking, I don't know what all this means. But because of my family's view of the Bible, this plenary verbal, every word's inspired by God, I felt like the words were magical. And that even what I didn't understand would wash over me and change me somehow. So I had probably an odd relationship to the text from maybe what most people's would be. But then I remember getting my first NIV Bible, New International Version, when I was 8. And I remember thinking, this just feels different. It doesn't feel as, elevated. Yeah. But the older I got, as a Southerner especially, I'm like, what's my relationship to this tongue? I'm from the Appalachian, the foothills, the Appalachian Mountains, lived in Texas, lived in New Jersey, lived in New York, lived in Scotland, but you can hear nothing, it never went away, And there are things about the tradition that I feel in my voice that are part of how I respond. And then there are those writers who become heroes for me. It's Flannery O'Connor. Mm-hmm. It's Charles Simic, who I did my PhD dissertation on and wrote a book on. And it's my adopted heroes like Jane Kenyon, who just remind you of the beauty of language. So I would say when I write, I try not to think of those things, or it'll just cripple you. But when you look at your work, you go, oh yeah, I feel how I vibe with this hero, with that hero, with the sacred text of my tradition. Yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but it's real. Yeah. Thank you. It's a beautiful question.
Good question. Okay. Yeah, Karen?
Hi. I have a question about the long poem. Now, I didn't study poetry, so you're going to have to forgive some of my maybe simple questions. But if you're writing something that has six different parts to it, are you writing the 6 different parts at the same time, or are you writing one story through and then the next one? And what would and my second question is, what would happen if I read it that way? What if I read like each of the things from the beginning to the front?
That's a really interesting question. A very interesting question about process. I appreciate it. The basic answer is both. And the number of drafts that go into making, I want to use the term multi-sequencing is an important concept for me. And that means you're setting in motion 4 threads or 4 themes in this 50-section poem. And every few sections, you keep pushing that one thread forward. The other threads keep going forward, and there's a sequencing going on, and they keep wrapping around each other. So it becomes, I hope, a challenging but also playful and interesting. I keep saying fun. I really want to sell this book. Weave, and maybe even a little bit like film, has some yes. Relationship to film in a way of movement. But really you do both in this process, because one will start in a linear progression, writing sequence 1 to section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At a certain point, after you get through part of a draft, you have to start blocking it, a little bit like a playwright might block scenes. And as you start blocking it, you start seeing the other scenes in a block line. And you're trying to figure out how to make it work the best. And it's an interesting process. You could try to read that way, That's really an interesting idea. You could try to do it. I think it's a lot of fun just to keep reading each section and seeing how these sections hook and move. But thanks for that.
Well, one thing I wanted to add to that is I think sometimes there's a recurrence of imagery that'll help kind of tie things together. You'll hear some of the same words that pop up from an earlier section that maybe come back into those things are, again, that weaving. Yeah. Did you want to speak to that or not? Yeah, okay. More questions from you all.
This is a question about translation. One of the objectives in the writing I do is to try to find truth and to try to express a truth. To what extent do you think your work, your writing, would survive, your truth would survive translation or does survive translation?
Good question.
I have very little to add to that. What was the philosophical joke? These philosophers were hanging out, and one of them said, well, yes, an English-speaking professor said to the German-speaking, oh, we love that Heidegger was just translated into English, and the German professor said, well, we're still waiting for him to be translated into German. So it wasn't Heidegger. Yeah, what was it? Do you know the joke?
It works.
I feel like
it works,
I'm.
it works.
I feel like I'm still waiting for my work to be translated into English. I do think I loved Charles Simich's work. I was really lucky. A lot of people, when you do a PhD dissertation, a lot of people get sick of their topic by the end, and I absolutely never tired of reading Simich or reading about Simich, and I got to meet him once many years ago and spend an afternoon with him. And he talks a lot about translation. So Simich was born in Belgrade, Yugoslavia in the late 30s. He experienced World War II as a child in the former Yugoslavia. When he was 5 or 6, he was blown across the room while he was sleeping from the apartment building across the street from his family being hit by a bomb. The family then moved out into the country. He and some friends were playing and came upon some dead German soldiers, and they did what children will do, and they pilfered the bodies. And he put on the helmet because some kid had already stolen the watch off the dead German soldier. And he goes to his family and takes the helmet off, and it's crawling with lice. So as a child, he got lice from a dead German soldier. Now, what does that set you up to write if not surrealistically driven gallows humor poetry? But Simich's fourth language was English, and he became our Poet Laureate for a year or two back in the earlier 2000s. And so he spoke Serbo-Croat, he learned Russian for a time, French, and then came to America at 15 and learned English. And so when people would talk about the difficulty of translation, what gets lost, he would say, yes, something gets lost. But I can sit here today and read a really good English translation of Sappho and feel what was going on with her over 2,000 years ago in the intimacy of lyric poetry. So for Simich, who knew that many languages, who translated himself many Eastern European poets into English, some fine poets, Vasco Popa, who's the other? There's another one, Ivan Lalic. For him to know that many languages and to be a translator, I think he hit the nail on the head. Like, you can still feel that essential experience come through, even though the things that move the body of that initial writer, the cadences of their speech, they're lost unless we learn the languages. And yet still there's that something human that we can almost touch across thousands of years.
Yeah, those are great points, Donovan. Simich was a really magical writer. I would just add briefly to that by saying I'm really paraphrasing Robert Lowell. All translation is a version. It's a new version in a new language. And having done collaborative translation from Armenian into English, my Armenian's not good enough to do it without a really good person to work with. But you work as hard as you can to find equivalents Armenian rhythmically it's rhythmically and syntactically very different from English and also the Anglo-Saxon languages. So I'm not worried. I'm not going to try to find I'm not going to try to imitate the Armenian syntactical rhythmic structures. It won't work. It'll come out sounding silly. I've got to find the right counterpart in English and make a decision about the kind of syntax I believe is the most effective to capture what that writer was doing in the Armenian language 100 years earlier. And that's challenging and interesting. At the other end of it, I've worked with translators who translate my work into other languages. And I see how difficult it is. And I feel sad that all the beauty, or whatever you want to call it, all the passion you put into making your music in English is not going to get over into the other language. The other language has a different musical structure. Syntactical is probably the better word, syntactical structure. So I've got to trust that this translator has a keen enough ear and mind to know how to find a register in French or German to get my English or Armenian, I'm working on 2 Armenian editions now, to get it into their language. So I know that a lot's going to be lost, but I do believe, and I agree with what Donovan's saying, I too was reading Sappho Fragments last week, and they're alive, and they're powerful. It's just in English. And, it's interesting to think that the King James Version of the Bible didn't come out of English. It came out of earlier Latin, in this case, but really think of all the languages that have preceded the King James Version and how great the King James Version is, because they got it right. They got a formula right for English. Those who are scholars can talk about Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, and Latin versions. And hence is the joy and the power and the profundity of language. Yes. And I think that's why we are all here, because language is the realest of the real. The truth of the truth is in language. Mm-hmm. And I know we poets stand by that. Mm-hmm. So thank you for your question.
I think that's a wonderful place for us to end up. Thank you both so much for your wonderful readings, for the power of your words, your books. Please go buy some books. Thank you all for being here this evening. And go buy some books. I'm sure they'll be happy to sign them for you.
Thank you. That was
I had more questions, but I thought